In 1970, in streets that looked like this one, people walked into their bank and borrowed against the only thing they had, the house they were living in. Not to renovate, not to buy a second place, to buy shares in a nickel mine, somewhere most of us couldn't have found on a map. The stock had been worth pennies. Within months, it touched $280 a share. It was called Poseidon. At its peak, this one hole in the Western Australian desert was valued at more than the biggest bank in the country. 6 months later, it was over. This is how we talked ourselves into it, and it's worth understanding because we've done it since. To understand how it happened, you have to understand what we'd already lived through. This country built itself on what it could pull out of the ground and off the land. Wool, then gold, then iron ore. Here, prosperity has a habit of arriving all at once. The gold rushes are still in our family stories. Most of us grew up with the same quiet idea in the background that somewhere out in the red dirt there is one more strike waiting, and there's no reason it couldn't have your name on it. It's not a foolish idea, it had been true before. So in 1969, when the next one came along, nobody needed convincing. We only needed to be told where to sign. The setup came from the other side of the world. In 1969, a long strike shut down the giant Canadian nickel producer that supplied much of the West. At the same time, a war in Vietnam was consuming metal at a rate nobody had planned for. Nickel became scarce. Scarce became expensive. And expensive sent every exploration company on Earth out looking for more. Which is how a small Australian explorer with almost no money ended up drilling near a place called Windarra in the desert northeast of Kalgoorlie. Late September 1969. The drill core comes up carrying nickel. The assay results are not yet confirmed, but in a market this hungry, confirmation is a formality that can wait. The news moves the way news moved in 1969. A phone call, a telegram, a word in a stockbroker's ear. A share that had traded well under $1 goes to 6, then to 38 in a matter of weeks. And that was before most of the country had even heard the name. What happened next wasn't really a financial event. It was a social one. Nickel tips got passed around the pub the way footy tips did. Blokes who'd never owned a share in their lives were suddenly talking drill grades over a beer, and they weren't being stupid. Someone they knew had already made money. Women who'd never spoken to a stockbroker were placing orders between the washing and the school run. And into all that appetite came the operators. Dozens of tiny exploration floats appeared almost overnight. A company name, a patch of desert, a promise. The papers called them penny dreadfuls. And here's the number that still stops me. For a stretch of that summer, the Sydney Stock Exchange traded more shares than Wall Street. Wall Street. From a country of 12 million people. February 1970. Poseidon touches $280 a share. At that price, this one company, with one unproven mine and not a single ton of nickel sold, is valued at around $700 million. Roughly 3 times the Bank of New South Wales. The largest bank in the country. A bank with branches in every town, a century of deposits, and actual money in its vaults. Against a hole in the ground that no one had yet dug. Reality arrived quietly the way it usually does. Through 1970, the nickel shortage eased. Prices came back down. And at Windarra, when the ore was finally measured properly, rather than imagined, it was leaner than the story. Lower grade, less metal. A real mine, just not the one people had bought. The stock that had touched 280 slid and kept sliding. The people who had borrowed against their houses discovered what leverage means when the number goes the other way. By the mid-70s, Poseidon was in receivership. The mine everyone had bet the house on was eventually developed, quietly, by other hands, and it never made anyone a fortune. Here's the part that matters. Poseidon didn't rise because the mine was real. It rose because the story was better than the facts, and because everyone we knew was already in. That second reason is the one that gets us, and we haven't stopped. The lithium runners, the crypto punts, the little explorer your uncle swears is the next big one. The commodity changes, the desert changes, the feeling doesn't. Every generation gets its own Poseidon. Most of us only recognize ours afterwards. The real Poseidon was never the mine. It was us. And how easily we can all agree on something without any of us checking it. Not because we were greedy, because it was a good story, and it had been true before. So an honest question, and I want real answers below, not advice, I don't do those. Just this. What was your Poseidon? The stock, the coin, the sure thing that you or someone in your family went all in on. I'm KC. This is KC Currents. Subscribe for more stories like this one.